Good, hanging out.
Okay, good. So we want to make sure there's more, because we'll get a lot more
Good
people.
point.
Just they always come on the first 10 minutes or so.
Good point.
Yeah, it usually makes a difference. And that, unless they got tired of listening to the old dinosaur talk, dinosaur doctor. My wife says, "Why do you use that terminology?" I said, "Because it's 49 years. It's almost a half a century, and it has some truth to it."
Experienced dinosaur.
Yeah, experience.
Knowledgeable dinosaur.
Um, so does anybody have any questions or anything that's burning on their mind before we get started on our regular meeting while we're waiting to see if anybody else joins in? Everybody's pretty all buffed up, huh?
We've got to flip that dinosaur doctor thing because I remember my dad talking about, he'd say, the only one I trust is old Doc Kendall. He was kind of this pioneer doctor that lived near the Sierras where we lived at the foothills of the Sierras. So a lot of times Doc Kendall was the only one that actually understood the root of something. Everybody else would get really lost in all the frou-frou, and so my dad trusted him.
Well, that's a good point. Thanks for sharing that.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
So a good friend of mine says she has GERD and badly, and she didn't have it for a while when I recommended that she go plant-based, and she did for a while, but then she regressed. Yesterday she had a meat dish. I don't know what it was in the afternoon, but at night she had watermelon, and she said the watermelon was really, really awful for her GERD. And here I'm telling her plants and fruits and vegetables and stuff. So why do you think that happened with particularly the watermelon?
So she had an episode. Go ahead, Scott.
I was just say water often does trigger GERD, heartburn, but it's only because of the diet that you're following. So it's not kind of like one of those things that's a symptom. So there's a lot of foods that are healthy, plant-based that might still trigger you, but if you get rid of the meat, the dairy, and the processed foods, then the problem gets corrected, goes away, and then when you eat watermelon or drink water or whatever, it's not going to flare it up. That being said, there are still some plant foods that can cause a little heartburn, like if you're completely plant-based and then you have like spaghetti sauce or something with all the tomatoes, sometimes that can still be a trigger. So there are still certain foods in certain people that can be triggering. But what I would say superficially to what you said is that, well, it's not because of the watermelon, it's because she's still eating meat, dairy, and processed foods that's causing the problem. And then the kind of what sent her over the top is that the watermelon kind of triggered it a little bit, but it's not the watermelon's fault, if that makes sense.
Right. And you said water even can have
Yeah,
that
a lot of people will
effect?
drink a big glass of water like in the evening after dinner, and that can actually sometimes make heartburn worse if you already have underlying heartburn.
So what would be a good thing to drink?
Nothing. Or take small sips, or but
Oh, okay.
it's trying to treat the problem. You
Yeah.
could take an acid reducer, of course. You
Yeah, that she does.
eat dinner and then take Tums or
Yeah.
Pepsid
Yeah.
or something like that. But it's not that uncommon that after a spicy meal, a meat dairy meal, processed food meal, you'll get you're right on the edge. You're basically having heartburn already, but just not quite symptomatic yet. And then you drink a big glass of water or you eat
Okay.
something else, and it just
Right.
sends you over like, oh.
Okay. Thank you. She might
Yeah.
join tonight. I told her about it, so she might join tonight.
I'd like to do a little spin-off of that. Um, Scott's explanation about how you're eating the meat, dairy, and eggs, which are effectively the cause of that continuing GERD, and yet you drink something else and you think, well, it's just the water. Well, a similar thing, I just had a conversation this week with a person who's using a continuous glucose monitor. And so when she ate a food, she says, "Man, I'm getting these spikes off of bananas. And if I'm eating a plant-based food, I can see moment to moment that food's causing my blood sugar to spike. And it took me quite a bit of time for her to explain to her how it was the foods that she was eating days before that led to her insulin resistance that allowed what she was eating while she was monitoring moment to moment to show that huge spike. And that it wasn't the food that she was eating that caused that. It was the higher fat foods in that she was eating prior to that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
And so I told her, stop using the glucose, continuous glucose monitor. So she called me back today and she said after a few days of cutting down on the fat, she noticed that her blood sugars were trending downward and she finally stopped using it after about 3 or 4 days. But she wants to go back to it. And I said, well, don't go back to it too quickly. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, when you get hooked into wanting to monitor and, have control of your life, sometimes that can get in the way of you just doing the right thing. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so we've got closer to our 20 people, so we could probably, it's 10 minutes after. Tamara, perhaps you could kind of share, and then whoever logs on can hear what's going on.
Yeah, you can talk first, Tamara, and then just let me know when you want me to pull up your flyer. I can do that.
Okay, thank you, Scott. You can actually put the flyer up if you want anytime. I just wanted to let everyone know, my name is Tamara Wilhite, and I'm a Food for Life instructor. And I've planned a 4-week series coming up in June and July. And you can see there's going to be 4 classes, June 13th, June 20th, June 27th, and July 11th, skipping the 4th of July holiday. And it's from 6 to 8 p.m. It is $80 for the whole series, which does include Nick Barnard's Kickstart Your Health book. And there will be handouts at every class. And the main focus of these classes will be cooking and trying new foods. So there'll be a lot of different recipes presented at every class. It will start with a short lecture, and then I will do a full cooking demonstration of several different things. And then it will end with everyone eating the food together. It's a very safe place to come. There's no judgment about what you eat or don't eat. It's all about helping people eat more plant food and making it easier to figure out what you can cook and how to cook it, and just hopefully try some new recipes that you really like and you can take back to your life and incorporate them into your daily menu. So some of them, some ideas I'm thinking about is a cauliflower Alfredo pasta and brown rice with easy chili sauté kale with mushrooms. I'm going to have one day where I focus on some breakfast things. So oatmeal banana pancakes with fruit and a demonstrated tofu scramble. And then an apple cherry crisp is a healthy dessert. Also, I will be trying to have the class geared toward the people who are attending. So I'm open to, if there are things that the attendees want to see me make or have questions about, then I'm definitely open to that, as long as it is whole food plant-based. So if anyone is interested in signing up or finding out more about the classes, there's my email, and my phone number. And class is going to be limited to 12 people. That's just to make sure that everybody can see really well and we can kind of have some good one-on-one coaching. And it's a very supportive environment and kind of a group, encouraging each other and sharing the day-to-day triumphs and also struggles together.
So if anybody has any questions, feel free, and I know Jerry and I and Scott and Charlie, and I'm not sure anybody else on the Zoom tonight was at Tamara's demonstration for the bigger group about a month ago, which was really, really fun and wonderful. So I highly recommend this. And also Tamara and I met today to talk more about details, and a special pre-4th of July item might be made depending on what everybody wants. And I think, Jerry, you're signed up for the class, right? I think you're muted, Jerry. Yep, okay. Okay.
Doesn't work. Doesn't work.
Anyway, anybody have any questions? And that, just to let you know, Scott sent that out in Sunday's newsletter, so all that information is on our website and also included in the newsletter.
And I'll show you on the website where I have it, where it's living too. So if you deleted the newsletter or something, you just go to the upcoming events tab here on the livelifestylemedicine.com website, click on upcoming events, and then scroll down. It's always in chronological order, like Charlie's Wednesday classes are recurring, so it's always the first one here. And then here you go. Power of Plant-Based Nutrition for Health with Food for Life instructor Tamara Wilhite. And so to get access to, it has the basic information, but to have access to that flyer I just showed you, just click right here. See the class flyer by clicking here, and there it comes. There it is. It's just under upcoming events on the class website right there. All right.
It's only in person, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you. Too bad.
Mhm.
Are you not in the area, Sarah?
I'm Seattle. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Where are you located?
In Seattle.
Oh, I'm in Montana.
There you go.
Well, maybe down the road we can do a combo.
Okay. Thanks for thinking about it. Yeah.
We can get better Wi-Fi at the Grange or somewhere we have better Wi-Fi. All right, thanks. Thanks,
Thank you,
Tamara.
Tamara.
Thank you.
Everybody's asking about food classes, and so thanks for doing that. Looking forward to it. And I myself had learned how to make tofu. Not make tofu, but actually cook tofu. I took the extra firm and took off the extra wetness, and my wife showed me how to chop it up into cubes. I'd never done that before, even though it's very simple. You know, if you haven't done something before, it seems a bit awkward, and I don't know if I can do this and whatever. And then we threw it in a bag with and added some coconut aminos, just the right amount, and shook it up a little bit to get a little of that spread around and let it kind of marinate for, she says she does it up to a whole day, and we did ours for 15 to 30 minutes, something like that. I guess maybe that's why hers tastes so much better, although mine came out okay. And then she had some of the other spices that she puts into this, like the nutritional yeast and the Nuchit Parmesan, whatever it is. And then there was something else. I wrote all this down so I could replicate it since she just fractured her wrist. It was one-handed, and I've become the cook in the house, and she could stand there and direct me, but there may be a time when I really need to do it. Um, and maybe I wanted to surprise her at some time in the future. I don't know. So I wrote down how to do that and then threw it in the air fryer and then added a little bit in the pan, another spice of some sort. I can't recall the name right now, but I have it written down. And we cooked it for 9 minutes. She says you could have cooked it for 10. You made it a little crispier. For me, it was perfect. For her, she's, the gourmet. And so I said, okay, I'll do it a minute longer the next time. Anyway, we're having fun with that. And then beans, I learned how you don't just cook the beans, you add some things with the beans, the dehydrated veggies. And let's see, what else was in there? A little pepper and a little flakes of peppery, like jalapeno flakes or whatever those are, and a couple other things which I wrote down. And my mouth is watering because it makes such a difference having a little flavor with those beans compared to just eating beans that you've cooked up in a pot, which I think many people do if they don't have some instruction like Tamara might be providing for them. So, anyway, that's my little experience for the last few days of adding to cooking skills. I actually took a cooking class. It was by, I can't remember the name. It was an online class where we took photos of the foods we made. And I learned how to use a knife. Actually, I had never done that about I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago when I decided to experiment and try to learn how to cook. But it never went very far because I have this cook who is spectacular living in the same household. And she was not ready to yield up that skill. And I never pushed her and I never really had the interest until now. So that's my brief little foray into encouraging any of you who have a problem. If you're forced into learning to cook, uh, do it and have fun with it. And by the way, many of you know that our breakfast takes about 20 minutes for two of us to chop up and steam. And, we have about 30 different, maybe 35 different plants for just breakfast, lunch. And so yours truly is preparing all of those by himself right now. Done it for a few days, and it's actually been fun. I'm like, okay, this has been a challenge. Can I do this? Or am I gonna, get tired on my feet? All right,
So, th-
enough
so I think
playing.
I
You
think
all.
I think the point that I take with Charlie is I'm similar to him in that way. It's like we might be experts in nutritional science, but we're not experts on food or cooking. So that's why we need these other people, like Tamara and other people that have done our cooking demonstrations and things, because I know where my limitations are. That's a whole nother being a good cook and all that is another thing.
Yes.
Has to do.
Any comments from anyone?
He said, I'm hell. I'm not cook.
Yeah. There's someone in the background.
It's Jerry, but her microphone's cutting out.
Oh, okay.
Well, I've been playing with baking tofu. I don't have an air fryer, but I've been messing around with like baking tofu.
Uh-huh.
And, kind of experimenting with it.
Well, do you need some additional spices for it or anything?
No, I mean, I looked at some recipes and they talk about like pressing and getting the liquid out. I've just been sort
Yeah.
of cooking the liquid out, like just leaving it in the oven. And then, like, I tried baking it with tofu, which wasn't as good as just adding it at the end, and I put on some sesame seeds, and I just kind of, tastes okay. Tastes pretty good.
Okay, as far as that liquid, Christine had all she does is takes a towel, a kind of a thin kitchen
Oh,
towel,
okay.
and she wraps it up, wraps it around, and folds it over and doesn't press at all, but the water just soaks right into this towel.
Huh. Okay.
It's
Well,
easy. You
yeah,
don't have to buy a press.
I was just slow baking it, like in sort of like dehydrating it almost, like on a
Yeah.
low temp, or moderately low temp, and then add the soy sauce at the end when it's sort of, baked a little. But anyway, yeah.
Nancy, go ahead. Unmute. You're still muted, Nancy.
I
There
always
you go.
forget to unmute. So I take a dinner plate, and then on top of that, I put a salad plate. And then I have this really heavy cookbook, which is not a vegan cookbook or anything, but it's really heavy. And I put it on and let it, then the water comes out, and I'll take off the water for a bit. And then sometimes I'll let it go a little longer. But yeah, it works real well to do that. So takes the water out. And I'm sure everybody has a heavy book around somewhere. So
Yeah.
anyway, it doesn't cost anything. I've seen those little tofu presses and I think, oh, that would be nice. But hey, what I do works. So
So Jerry says she made Tamara's chocolate mousse, I think is what it was. And it was a magnificent treat. So really love that. All right. Anybody else before I get started? All right. Fiber. We have, it looks like most everybody has been here before. Is there any new person who's never been to any of our classes? And if there is, just unmute and say how you found out about them. We're just kind of curious. All right. Looks like everybody has been here before. I'm going to try to mute, just make sure that everybody's muted in the room before I go ahead and get started. And then you'll have an opportunity to unmute later on. So I guess I just want to talk for a couple minutes. What do I want to talk about? I want to talk about fiber. It's sort of like a broken record with me in this fiber stuff. But the more I learn about it, the science, I kind of keep expanding and I'm learning a little bit more and a little bit more each year that ticks by. So I keep hearing, not as much, but it still comes up, especially in early classes that we start. Where do you get your protein? And everybody's still worried that they're not getting enough protein and, that's the deficiency in their diet and it gives them energy and whatever it might be. The protein gives them muscles and it takes a while for them to kind of understand that if you eat enough calories, you're going to get enough protein if you're eating plant-based, and that the building blocks of all protein comes from plants, and that we mammals make our own protein, and we don't need middlemen. The issue of fiber is interesting in that we used to eat a whole lot more fiber than we do now. We used to eat upwards of 60, 80, and 100 grams of fiber a day. And in places around the world that are eating those quantities of fiber, they don't have near the health problems that we have in our country. We eat an average of about 15 grams of fiber a day, 14 or 15. Our country recommends 25 to 35 grams a day, which sort of is a compromise. It's sort of like, well, what could we maybe get people to do versus what might really bring them the best health? And if you look at Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen, you'll find that if you eat like he's recommending, 3 servings of legumes, 3 servings of whole grain, 4 serving of fruit, 5 serving of veggies, with a serving of nuts and flax seeds, that you will be eating about 60 to 70 grams of fiber each day. And so there is a way to do this. It's not painful. It actually can be fun. Now, when I first started this, I thought it would be painful because I had to give up all those foods that I really love. But I no longer look at it as having given up anything. I've just reached out and found foods that I really like. I love the whole food plants that I get right now in my diet. And I'm not at all disappointed that I can't eat the dripping cheese that's on the TV commercials or the French fries that I used to love, or even the ice cream that was such a favorite of mine. Uh, Maybe some of this is mind over matter, but maybe some of it is just habit, taste buds changing. When you feel good, you can have a really good mindset. And the studies show, as we've talked about in past, that if you're eating enough fruit and vegetables, you're going to be a happier person. That's what the studies show. How many servings of fruit and vegetables do you need? About 9. That's about what I eat, 9 or 10 every day. And so I know that sounds like an awful lot to some of you who are eating 1 serving of fruit a day or a couple servings of veggies. It sounds like a lot, and it doesn't have to be done in a day or a week or a month. You could transition over a several year period of time. But the closer you become to whole plant foods, the healthier you will be. So what I learned this year about fiber was, what is fiber? It's sugar that's hooked together in such a way that your body doesn't metabolize it, like in the upper digestive tract, the hydrochloric acid, the pancreatic juices, they don't break down the bonds of this fiber very easily. It takes the microbiome, your bacteria, down lower in your intestinal tract to actually break apart these bonds, break apart the fiber, which they use as their food. And when they're using it as their food, what's being released is protein, carbohydrate, and fat ultimately in plant cells. Let's go back a little bit. Our intestines are 30 feet long plus. You put food in your mouth. If it's animal products, the cells in those animal products have cell membrane. The cell membrane is kind of thin and it's easily broken down by hydrochloric acid and the digestive juices in your pancreas. And so the protein, carbohydrate, and fat is absorbed high up in the intestinal tract. When those macronutrients are absorbed high up in your intestinal tract, they don't make it down to the ileum where your L cells are. These are specialized cells that produce a protein that you're seeing every night just about on TV. Or you have a neighbor or a friend or a relative who's using this protein. You know what it is? GLP-1, glycogen-like peptide. So what is this GLP-1 that your own body can make without spending $1,000 a month do? Well, it stimulates the vagus nerve down in your intestinal tract and sends electrical impulses back to your brain that says, I've had enough to eat. It also cuts down on the inflammation inside your body. It came out, these drugs came out for diabetes control. It decreased insulin resistance. So you can make your own GLP-1. but you're not going to make it when you're eating animal products. They're going to be absorbed high, never making it down to these L cells. If you're eating plants, the plants have cell walls so each plant cell has a cell wall, and that cell wall is made of fiber. That fiber is not easy to digest higher up. And so when the bacteria digests that fiber down low in the ileum, what gets released? The protein, the carbohydrate, the fat, and those nutrients stimulate the L cells to produce your own GLP-1. So the more whole plant foods that you're eating, the more GLP-1 you're going to be producing, the more satisfied you will be. So you'll eat less calories and be just as satisfied. And you will have just benefits. I don't know. That's the insoluble fiber that we're talking about. There is soluble fiber, which acts a little bit different. It's the mushy stuff. Like oatmeal can get a little mushy. And that mushy stuff kind of acts like glue higher up in the intestine and throughout it. And it combines with excess cholesterol and excess estrogen, excess testosterone, and excess toxins. And it wheelbarrows them right out of your body. So, multiple benefits for fiber. And that's all I wanted to do in the way of orientation to the next video that I'm going to play. It's by Neil Barnard. He is our Physician Committee for Responsible Medicine founder, a great guy. I love listening to him always. And I've got a video that I'm going to share with you. It's a 10-minute one. And I see there's a couple things in the chat. I'm going to look at them, and they're nothing to do with me. So, all right. I'm using my wife's computer tonight because my camera keeps dying. And so just making sure we can get to this. Oh, I can't just click on that. I have to share the screen. So let's do a share screen first. Here's the share. And we're going to do share the sound and video. We're going to do the sharing. Then we're going, are you sure you'll lose quick access? Yeah, close the dock. How come that doesn't work? Are you sure? I'm sure. You'll lose quick access to dock search and features like camera privacy. Close the dock. Cancel. Can't get it to cancel. Why is that? All right. I think you can see my screen now. Now I just need to find where I'm going here with the class. And we're going to GI. Complicated lifestyle. As you can see, there's a lot of files here. But can you see this, Scott?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Today we're going to talk about our digestive tract. There is probably no part of the body that is as affected by foods as our digestive tract because it's really the beachhead. It's where foods occur first. So let's take a look from the top all the way down to the bottom of how foods can affect us. First thing, gastroesophageal reflux, GERD, heartburn. That's when the stomach, which has acid in it, is allowing that acid to go up back into the esophagus, so you feel this burning sensation back behind your chest. Well, what causes it? We don't really know what causes it for everybody, but here are the most common suspects. Having extra weight, meaty diets, and other fatty foods. For some folks, it might be caffeine or alcohol. Peppermint is an interesting one. It actually loosens up that muscle at the top of the stomach, allowing the acid to come through. For some folks, it might be chocolate. But what we see a lot of the time is when people lose weight and when they go on low-fat vegan diets, for whatever reason, their GERD often cleans up. Irritable bowel. Irritable bowel syndrome is where your digestive tract really isn't your friend anymore. One day it's constipation, the next day it might be diarrhea. It really can't make its mind up. And you have pain with it and you have bloating with it. Well, one of the most common contributors to this can be milk products. Milk contains a sugar called lactose. And have you heard of lactose intolerance? It's a totally normal condition. All it means is that you're not a baby anymore, so you don't have the enzymes anymore for digesting milk. And this is actually the biological norm. What I mean by that is if you were to test adults all around the world, most of them have lactose intolerance. They no longer have the enzymes for digesting milk. So the lactase enzyme breaks the lactose into two smaller sugars, glucose and galactose, and once that enzyme is gone, you're stuck with this big load of lactose going down into your intestinal tract. Bacteria ferment it, they make gas, and that's a big cause of irritable bowel. Solution: leave the milk and dairy products off your plate. Very easy. Now there are some other contributors too, not just dairy products. For some people, artificial sweeteners, if they're using a lot of them, can irritate their digestive tract. Fatty foods can as well. When fat touches the intestinal wall, it causes the muscles to contract a little bit, and sometimes it's a little bit like squeezing a tube of toothpaste on both ends at the same time. Ouch. Some people might have a problem with wheat, some with eggs. Peppermint oil might actually help because in this case, it relaxes the muscles of the digestive tract. Now, even more serious, Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. These are inflammatory conditions. If you could look at the intestinal tract, it looks angry. It's red and it's inflamed, and sometimes it earns you a trip to the operating room. Well, see your doctor if you have these conditions by all means, but be conservative. If you don't have to have surgery, by all means put it off. And doctors are now looking at diet changes that might help. We're seeing this especially with Crohn's disease. For some reason, many people do very well when they get away from dairy products. High fiber foods used to be forbidden for people. Now we know that they're the best thing for you. So that means well-cooked beans and vegetables and fruits, whole grains. You might want to go easy on the raw vegetables and fruits if you're having trouble with them. Let's talk about gallstones. Gallstones can be really painful, but there's a lot we can do with our diet to improve things. The liver makes something called bile. It's a digestive juice. It helps us to break apart the foods that we're eating. The liver takes this bile, it sends it into the gallbladder where it's stored, and then after you eat a meal, it goes down the common bile duct and it goes into the intestinal tract to help us digest food. But sometimes this bile starts to crystallize. It's like it's forming little nuggets right in the gallbladder or elsewhere in that biliary tree. This is the pancreas, and you can see right there on the left-hand side there is a spot where a gallstone perhaps could form. Ouch, you don't want that. Well, if you could look at them under a microscope, what you discover is they're mostly made of cholesterol. So the solution to gallstones, surprisingly enough, is very much like the solution for heart problems. We want to lower our cholesterol. That means reducing the fat in our diet, especially the animal fat. Get that out of the diet. Increasing high fiber foods. That's whole grains and beans and vegetables and fruits. And losing weight in a healthful way is really important too. Now, sometimes when people lose weight really too fast, by starving themselves, sometimes gallstones can actually form. So what you want to do is to follow a low-fat, plant-based diet, and the weight loss is healthy and gradual. Let's talk about colon cancer. It's a serious condition, and it's particularly common in westernized countries. Why would that be? Well, it turns out that it's strongly linked to a meat-based diet. If you compare people who rarely have meat to men or women who have meat more or less every day, those who have it about every day have roughly 3 times the risk of developing colon cancer compared to people who don't eat meat or eat it only very rarely. Well, why would that be? Why would meat lead to colon cancer? Well, first of all, fatty foods actually change your intestinal bacteria. Did you know that you have bacteria in your intestine? That's perfectly normal. But if you feed them a fatty diet, it's a funny way to think about it, but that's what we're doing, those bacteria actually change. They become the kind of bacteria that can produce carcinogens from your own digestive juices. So you don't want to be feeding a lot of fatty foods to them. That means getting away from the meat. Secondly, you need fiber in your diet, but meat doesn't have any fiber. It's not from a plant, so it doesn't have plant roughage. And if you don't have fiber in your diet, what happens to your digestion? It slows down. And if it slows down, then anything that's there, any carcinogen, cancer-causing chemical, that might be working its way down your digestive tract, it stays there that much longer. And that's not good. So we want fiber in our diet. And third, cooking can produce some cancer-causing chemicals, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But you really want to bring back the fiber, and let me remind you of these numbers. We've talked about this before, but a typical serving of beans, about 7 grams of fiber, vegetables about 4, a typical fruit like an apple or an orange, maybe about 3 grams, bread, a little bit lower, a little bit higher depending on the type, cold cereals, roughly 3 grams per serving, oatmeal, about 4. Earlier I said that cooking can be a problem. A lot of people are getting away from fried chicken. That's a good choice. You'll skip a lot of fat. But some of them are switching to grilled chicken. And killjoy that I am, I have to say, I went and tested what's in grilled chicken. You know those black grill lines that you see? Well, it turns out when you send a little bit of that material to a lab and ask what's in it, they come back with something called FIP. Here it is. This will not be on the test, but this is the chemical structure of FIP. It's a carcinogen. That is, it's a cancer-causing chemical. How is it produced? When you grill skeletal muscle, I'm talking about the muscle of an animal. It could be a fish, it could be a chicken, or it could be beef. When it's cooked at that high grilling temperature, these carcinogens form. My team went to McDonald's. We went to Applebee's and Burger King and Chick-fil-A, Chili's, Outback, and TGI Fridays, and we took their grilled chicken sandwiches and grilled chicken salads. We sent them to a laboratory, and you know what? We found this FIP carcinogen in every single sample at every single one of these restaurants. So it's a reliable thing. If you want to avoid these carcinogens, the answer is pick something other than that grilled chicken. By the way, if you grilled vegetables, these cancer-causing chemicals don't form. It's formed when you heat up muscle tissue, that's meat, at a very high temperature. We've got more good news when it comes to colon cancer. Not only can we make diet changes to help prevent it, it turns out that a person who has been already diagnosed with colon cancer, if they make diet changes, they go to a plant-based diet, a high-fiber diet, it improves the odds of survival. And let me get even a little bit more personal, if I may. Let's talk about hemorrhoids. Years ago, a wonderful researcher named Dr. Dennis Burkitt started looking at why certain conditions are really common in Europe and America, but rare in Africa and other countries. And what he found is that if you're not eating fiber, well, what happens? You get constipated, but people spend a lot of time in the bathroom because they're constipated. And if that happens, then they start pushing extra hard. Are you with me? Well, if you're pushing hard because a person's trying to go to the bathroom, what happens is the blood vessels of the lower part of the abdomen start engorging with blood, and that's the cause of hemorrhoids. And you know what? The most grateful letters that I get from people are not from people where their diabetes went away or we've cured their cholesterol problem, but when their hemorrhoids went away, I got to tell you, that's one grateful person. Similarly, at the top part of the abdomen, your stomach is up there, and when a person is pushing really hard in the bathroom, their stomach can actually lift up through the diaphragm. That causes what we call a hiatal hernia, and that's cause of heartburn. So very simple. Bring the fiber back in the diet. There's no more constipation. Going to the bathroom is an easy thing, and it's not a big issue anymore, okay? So we've talked about problems from the top to the bottom, and it's easy. A low-fat vegan diet, keeping the oils out of the diet, bringing the high-fiber foods in, that's going to really help your digestive tract and make you feel better too. Thanks a lot.
Okay, we're going to stop the share for a moment and see if there are any questions. I see there's like 3 entries. Soak the cashews for an hour. Okay, you're working on recipes. Any thoughts from anybody? Doris? No?
Yes,
I guess there was a hand in there. I'm sorry.
that's okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, all's well. No, I didn't have my hand. I'm trying to okay. There, you can see me.
Oh, that's great.
Uh-huh.
Welcome. Glad you could make it. Any
Yeah.
questions from anyone? Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, he said colon cancer is strongly linked to meat because it has no fiber. And I imagine we would say that's also true with fish.
So I throw the question back. Do you think fish has fiber?
Only if you eat the bones.
And actually, bones are not fiber.
Oh, okay.
They're bones. So mammals have bones and plants have fiber. This
Okay.
is an important point, which a lot of people don't understand. And that's why it's confusing why people think that fish is in a separate category. Fish is an animal, just like any of the other animals in terms of uh, the lack of benefit. Other than maybe you could say fish has some omega-3, but it also comes packaged with no fiber. It comes packaged with maybe mercury and dioxin and now plastic beads, which have hormone disruptors. So if you like fish, then use it as a condiment, a little taste on the side, as opposed to the main part of your meal. Get your little treat fish like it's a chocolate bar. And, it has cancer, potentially cancer promoting or hormone disrupting kinds of chemicals in it. You don't want a lot of fish in your life, in spite of the fact that you are told the Mediterranean diet is so wonderful and that there's fish in the Mediterranean diet and there's olive oil. Well, the Mediterranean diet has never been demonstrated to reverse our number one killer. That's heart disease. So maybe it's a good compromise for some people from what the standard American diet is, what they're eating now, as opposed to the complete transition to a totally whole food, plant-based diet. But if you're not getting the benefits you want, then I'd encourage you to do as far toward the whole food plant-based spectrum and as far away from the standard American diet fare as you can place yourself.
And back to the colon cancer question, they have done studies really interesting where they compare native Africans with African Americans. And so what they took, so genetically, similar. And so when they looked at the diets of native Africans versus African Americans, they actually, in the study, it was interesting because both groups ate about the same amount of fiber, pretty low. And so we know it's not the fiber, but what they figured out the difference was the amount of meat that was being eaten. So the native Africans only had a fraction of the risk for colon cancer as the African Americans. And so when they actually looked at the diets of the Africans they studied, they were not eating that healthy of a diet either. They were eating really a lot of processed foods, and so the amount of fiber that each group was eating was similar, but they had a fraction of the colon cancer. And so but they looked at the diets, the biggest difference was the amount of meat. So the African Americans were eating a lot more meat than the native Africans, even though they were eating similar amounts of plant roughage. And so it really is something about the meat. The higher the amount of meat you take in, the higher your risk for colon cancer.
Yeah.
Did you notice he said FIP? And did you notice on the screen heterocyclic amines? Those are carcinogenic compounds. And that is not something we learned in school. It's not something you hear in the news media about. No one is explaining to you that there's carcinogens in heating up any kind of meat under high temperatures.
Yeah.
And plants, they don't develop those. Kind of fascinating science, yes?
Yeah.
Kind of disturbing if you want to keep eating your meat, though.
Right.
Another interesting thing too is the people that work in restaurants where they grill meat, even if they're not eating it themselves, they seem to be at higher risk for cancers because they're getting all those carcinogens in the air. If you're frying all that you're broiling or frying all that skeletal muscle, you're actually getting exposed to those carcinogens, even if you're not eating them. And so that's another concern as well. You know, I worked in my teen years, I worked at McDonald's flipping burgers. And so I probably got exposed to some carcinogens back then, even though didn't know any of this. We didn't know any of this back then.
Did we know this 20 years ago? No. 15 years ago? No. Most of us not 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and many still do not have any clue about it. Gregor knew about it back about 13 years ago, I think. Nancy, unmute yourself.
Just a minute. Yeah, I just muted myself accidentally. Okay, so I had a hiatal hernia, and I would ask the doctors and so on and so forth what caused it. So I am so glad to watch this video. I mean, this was, gosh, probably 20 years ago that I started having problems, maybe even before. And this video explains what was going on. This was before, of course, I went whole food plant-based. And then, yeah, it was kind of interesting. And then I remember when I was pregnant, I was having problems with constipation. And I thought, oh, I need more fiber. So I was eating a lot of wheat bran. And that, I mean, it made my BM large, but it was hard. And that was pretty painful. And I don't know, I wish I'd known all this other stuff way back when, but
Well,
so
times
anyway.
they are changing. That's why we're all learning
Yeah,
and continuing to adjust according
yeah,
to what the latest science shows.
yeah. But I would ask doctors, hey, what's causing this hiatal hernia? Because I thought it was because I was, obese, which may have been a little factor in it, but it was, but now it's like, oh, I wasn't having that much fiber probably. So anyway, just kind of interesting because now I know something that I didn't used to know.
Well, good
And
you came to class.
and do you know why a hiatal hernia makes you have more acid reflux? Does anyone want to know the answer to that? So to think about the chest cavity as a low pressure system. So our lungs, we breathe in, our lungs expand and that lowers pressure. And if you're studied meteorology or kind of how physics and things like that, air flows from high pressure to low pressure. And so when you expand your lungs, you decrease the pressure inside your lungs and the air rushes in. You don't actually suck air in. Your lungs get larger and that sucks that goes from high pressure to low pressure, sucks it in. And so if you think about your chest cavity as a low pressure system, and your abdomen is a higher pressure system because we're keeping all our organs and stuff in place. And so what happens is, so the little sphincter at the top of your stomach that keeps the acid in your stomach, that's below the diaphragm. So that's in your actual abdominal cavity. And so that's a higher pressure system. And also it's kind of kinked off a little bit. It's a little muscle there that helps keep the acid down also. But when that top part of your stomach, where it's called the hiatus of the stomach, the top part of the stomach where that little sphincter is, that little muscle is, if that herniates up above the diaphragm, now that is in the chest cavity, not in the abdominal cavity anymore, because your diaphragm is like the divider between your chest cavity and your abdominal cavity. So now that area is above the diaphragm in a lower pressure system. And so now it's easier for the acid to just go right up your esophagus because it's in a low pressure system and it just kind of goes on up. Whereas if it's down below the diaphragm, it's kind of in a higher pressure system. So that's if you're just curious as to why do you get heartburn when that part of your stomach is above the diaphragm versus below. There you go.
Yeah, well, the thing that got to me, it seemed to happen more when I was on vacation and even more when I was flying on an airplane. And I don't know, we were just wondering with the pressure you were saying that maybe that had a thing. And it felt like I was having a heart attack if I didn't know that it wasn't. But it could be really painful. And it helped if I would lie down. And I'm going, nope, I'm not gonna tell them I need to lie down on the airplane. They might think I need some medical help. And it's like, no, I just suffered for, it's usually over in 20 minutes or so, but it was
Okay.
really painful.
All right, well, I have another video to share with you, and so I'll be curious to see what your thoughts are. This is a video that you might wish to view the whole thing. I'm only going to share part of it. It's by Alan Desmond. It's on gut health, how a plant-based diet can affect that. It's on YouTube. And he's an interesting speaker.
Medical doctor. So a part of this talk is about where are we with that now in 2019. Over a century ago, Thomas Edison predicted that the doctor of the future would actually give no medicine, but would instruct his patients in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. I think he'd already recognized in the early 20th century that lifestyle medicine and unlocking lifestyle medicine might be the key to keeping people healthy and helping them to stay healthy. Unfortunately, over a century later, as physicians, we have completely missed the mark on that. To the point that in this opinion piece in the Journal of the American Medical Association, Journal of Medical Ethics, it's a mouthful, last year, David Katz made this statement in a kind of a rallying call to doctors around the world to sort of wake up to the need for more diet and lifestyle advice as part of conventional medicine. And it's sad but true, but the food that we eat now is now the main determinant of poor health in the Western world. So food, as he says, has undergone a truly dramatic transformation from essential sustenance into the single leading contributor to chronic disease and premature death. So can a plant-based diet change the world? So I'm going to talk mostly about my own areas of expertise, which are about gut health, health and longevity, asking, can a plant-based diet help you to avoid long-term disease and long-term medication? And then I'm going to address some of the other questions that may not be my areas of expertise, but they always come up, and I hear people talking and asking about them a lot. Could you somehow be leaner or maybe even more athletic on a plant-based diet? Can you tread more softly on our planet? And can a plant-based diet help you to exercise compassion? But before we do all that, let's come back into my clinic. So the reason that I advocate and recommend a whole food plant-based diet isn't because I went to medical school and I was a vegan at medical school. The opposite may be true, actually. But really, it was my patients who brought me to a whole food plant-based diet. So one of the things that I spend a lot of my time treating, even since I started, I think as a very newly qualified doctor back in 2002. So for the last 17 years, on a day-to-day basis, I've been involved in treating people with a condition called inflammatory bowel disease. Now, these are a group of conditions, these inflammatory bowel diseases, where sections of your bowel become inflamed and damaged and dysfunctional. We have medications that can help to reduce the inflammation, but very seldom get people into complete remission. For example, with Crohn's disease, which is about half the cases of inflammatory bowel disease, half of the patients who are diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease are going to end up having surgery to remove part of their bowel, basically to remove a diseased part of their bowel because it's not functioning anymore. Almost all of our patients with inflammatory bowel disease end up on long-term medication, and being diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease is no fun. Most people with inflammatory bowel disease would describe their health as being below good, and the rates of work absenteeism and school absenteeism are very high. And in fact, the inflammatory bowel diseases are diagnosed at a median age of about 30. So these are usually young people in the prime of their lives. They're working, they've got mortgages, they've got young kids, and now they're being told that they've got to come to the doctor's office every 3 months. And there's a good chance they're going to end up on some medication that means they're going to have to come up to a day ward every 8 or 12 weeks and sit in a room that looks a bit like a chemotherapy day unit, to be honest, and go on a drip and have medication to keep their inflammation under control. Now, when I was at medical school, we were taught that inflammatory bowel disease was kind of the paradigm of an autoimmune condition. You've gotten unlucky in the genetic lottery. There's something wrong with your immune system, so it's attacking your guts. So that's it, you're stuck with it, and we've got some medication that can help. But in fact, the more I've looked at it, the more I've realized, and mainstream gastroenterology is moving this way, that there's a lot you can do with diet and lifestyle. So your future is not set in stone when it was coming to inflammatory bowel disease. And whenever I would see or have or meet a patient who's been just diagnosed with one of these conditions, they'd already figured out that there was something to do with food here. So I've heard people asking the same question since my first day on the GI unit back in 2002. Okay, so I've been diagnosed with this, you've explained all that stuff to me. Is there anything I can do with food? And they don't mean, is there any food I should eat today to feel better or worse? What they mean is there any food I should be avoiding that can help me prevent that progression you've just described with more and more medication and increasing likelihoods of having surgery? In medicine, we're all about trying to give our patients evidence-based answers. So we'll only give our patients advice or a medication if we can look at medical studies that show us that they work. So that's a big stack of medical journals there to illustrate the fact that I've read loads of medical journals. Because over the years, particularly since becoming a consultant in 2012 and more recently the lead for treatment of inflammatory bowel disease at my hospital, I've been trawling through the mainstream medical literature so I could give my patients evidence-based answers. And I guess what I learned was there's a lot of very strong evidence out there, lots of stuff about inflammatory bowel disease that I never learned at medical school. So I learned that IBD is not just a genetic disease. There are a lot of variants, various factors in the etiology of inflammatory bowel disease. And there's a huge amount of evidence that diet is extremely important, both in the cause of and the progress of inflammatory bowel disease. Inflammatory bowel disease didn't really exist as an entity in the early 20th century, but now it affects 1 in 300 people in Europe. Perhaps 1 in 200 people in the UK now has inflammatory bowel disease. You probably all know someone who has ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. When we look at the epidemiological data, there's very, very clear story that as countries industrialize their environment and industrialize their food chain, these diseases start to come up and start to get diagnosed. We saw it in Europe and the United States and Australia in the post-war years, and then more recently as countries like Japan and Egypt, etc., have westernized their lifestyles and westernized their diets, they're starting to see these diagnoses appearing. In fact, the Lancet Medical Journal a couple of years ago highlighted this issue in a huge editorial piece and just warned us that inflammatory bowel disease is actually a slow epidemic. In a few years, we're not going to have the resources to treat all these patients. And when we zoom in on the dietary risk factors, there's really compelling evidence that shows that dietary fiber, just the fiber that you get from eating plants and whole grains and vegetables, actually strongly protects you from developing inflammatory bowel disease. And there's strong evidence that eating the animal protein, so the more animal protein you eat in your diet, the more likely you are to develop inflammatory bowel disease. There's plenty of studies showing that dairy fat can induce inflammatory bowel disease. And there's some really, really interesting research that we could have spent the whole day on today on the effects of animal-based diet on the gut microbiome. So we've seen studies where you take people and you put them on a very animal product heavy diet, and their gut microbiome changes into a pro-inflammatory gut microbiome, which is actually capable of inducing inflammatory bowel disease. And there have been so many studies showing that food additives that we get in processed foods, like emulsifiers, polysorbate, maltodextrin, carrageenan, the evidence showing that these food additives are so pro-inflammatory in the intestine, particularly in patients with inflammatory bowel disease, that a few years ago a team of researchers wrote to the Journal of Crohn's and Colitis and said, we've cracked it. Emulsifiers are causing Crohn's disease. They called it the emulsifier hypothesis of Crohn's disease. But in a way they were right, but it's a much bigger story than that. So over the years, because I would go and look at all these various studies from disparate sources, these epidemiological studies, lab studies, dietary intervention studies, I slowly came up with this green list and this red list. So when my patients say to me, is there anything I should eat? Is there anything I should avoid? I would came to the point where I would say to them, well, look, I'd prefer if you totally cut out processed foods and really avoided animal protein and animal fat and dairy. And I want you to avoid, in particular, food emulsifiers that are found in a lot of processed foods. And I want you to avoid the food additives that are found in a lot of processed foods. And I want you to build your diet around whole, unprocessed foods, fruits, vegetables, legumes, walnuts, flax seeds, beans and seeds, and whole grains. So before I even knew what a whole food plant-based diet was, I was already recommending to my patients that a whole food plant-based diet is really what the evidence tells us. If you want evidence-based answers, there's your evidence-based answer. Eat a whole food plant-based diet. It's impossible to read all that research about Crohn's and colitis without reading a lot more research about the effect of diet on the diseases and disorders that I see in my clinic every day, that we see on our hospital wards every day, or in our GP's offices, et cetera, et cetera. So I won't go through all of these, but it turns out that a whole food plant-based diet seems to tick all the right boxes for long-term gut health, whichever of these conditions you're looking for. So diverticular disease is a condition whereby you get these little pouches in the side of your bowel, predominantly your large bowel. They can get clogged up, they get infected. Your gut gets inflamed around the pouches. You can get stricturing. You can end up having a perforation or an abscess. You can end up in hospital. You can even have part of your bowel removed due to diverticular disease. Now, gladly, most people with diverticular disease don't end up seriously unwell, but they do have bothersome symptoms, and it reduces their quality of life. We've known since the 1970s, when Dennis Burkitt was writing about his experience as a surgeon working in London and working in rural Africa, that among populations who eat a whole food plant-based diet, particularly a high fiber diet, nobody gets diverticular disease. Yet diverticular disease affects about 80% of 80-year-olds here in the UK, about 30% of 30-year-olds. And in fact, in the US, you can almost call it ubiquitous. If you live long enough in the United States, you're probably going to get diverticular disease. And if you have diverticular disease, and if you look at the studies showing, well, what are the characteristics of your diet that predict running into trouble with your diverticular disease? It's high meat and low fiber are going to run you into trouble. Just going to talk a little bit about colon cancer. Unfortunately, in my job, I sit down with people all the time and I tell them that I've just diagnosed them with colon cancer. So I might do that once, twice, or 3 times per week. Now, that's always a very difficult conversation, and I'm very aware that that person's going to remember that conversation forever, and it's going to change their life forever. Even if they do really, really well, it's going to change their life forever. So what about a whole food plant-based diet and colon cancer? Well, we know, even Cancer Research UK, who would be relatively conservative in their estimates, would estimate that 55% of cases of colon cancer in the UK are due to 3 factors, one of 3 factors: low fiber diet, red and processed meat consumption, and being overweight or obese. Just those 3 things. So 55% of the 42,000 cases of colon cancer that occur in the UK every year are entirely preventable by diet and lifestyle. And I haven't even mentioned alcohol and smoking. Just food we eat and physical exercise and maintaining a healthy body weight could dramatically reduce the numbers of patients who have that difficult conversation with somebody like me every year. Just at the end there, NASH cirrhosis. So NASH is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or fatty liver disease, or foie gras liver, if you want. So this is a condition whereby you have fat deposited on your liver. Your liver doesn't like having fat deposited on it, which causes the liver to be inflamed. And about 10% of people with NASH, that condition, will end up developing cirrhosis of the liver in about 8 or 9 years. That's without touching a drop of alcohol. It's completely separate to alcohol or other chronic diseases of the liver. Having cirrhosis of the liver reduces your life expectancy. So it's surprising that this condition that wasn't even described in the medical literature 50 or 60 years ago now affects 20 to 30% of people in the UK. So we have an absolute epidemic of NASH cirrhosis. And when we look at the dietary risk factors for developing NASH and putting yourself at risk of NASH cirrhosis, it's the more animal products you consume and the more processed foods and free sugars that you consume. What's the antidote to that? Whole food, plant-based. We're seeing NASH cirrhosis all the time in our hospital wards now. And essentially what we're seeing, and I can think of maybe 2 or 3 episodes of this already this year, is we'll sometimes get, for example, you said an elderly person who's been admitted to hospital with pneumonia or a urinary tract infection or some sort of infection that can be serious enough when you're old, but usually people get better from, and they've been in hospital for 2 or 3 days, and then they go yellow because they've become jaundiced, and then they become encephalopathic and drowsy, and then they go into a coma. And then we have to sit down with their family and say, well, actually, you know, your mum's dying now. She's got liver failure. And they say, well, why is that? We say, well, the scans show that she has cirrhosis of the liver. They say, well, she never drank a drop in her life. We say, we know. This is NASH cirrhosis. We're seeing it more and more. So as a...
Okay, we're going to stop there. It goes on for another 20 minutes or so. There's a common theme. This common theme you hear every single week that you come. What is it? Eat more plants. Eat less animal products or no animal products. It's a common theme, and there's many good reasons the science shows for not eating animal products. As much as we love the taste, as much as that high calorie density animal product lights up our brain, it's just not a healthy source, and it's not the fuel we were meant to eat. You look at our teeth, you look at our long intestine, and you can figure out the fuel that we were meant to eat is plants. And that's kind of the continuing message. It's said in different ways. The science is different for different organs, perhaps, but the general theme is food really makes a difference in your life here. So, any thoughts from anyone who is just like, okay, I get it, but I just can't do it? Or, you know, why aren't we doing more of it? We've silenced the audience for a moment, only a moment. So your neighbor says that we have canine teeth to eat meat. So these canines, are they like dogs and cats and lions and tigers? Or are they more like, are your teeth more like elephant, giraffe, rhinoceros, gorilla? It's pretty obvious to me. Our teeth are, with the grinding molars, are much more like the plant eaters than what your neighbor thinks. But hey, your neighbor has a right. Some people believe the world was flat for the longest time. Maybe some still do. Flat worlders, I don't know if they're still around. And it's hard to convince someone who's got their mind made up. I get it, you know. But all of you who are in this room are kind of looking to see what the science has to say, not what the neighbor or the internet has to say. And you can check anything that we say in this room by going to Gregor's site and looking up the science and the articles and the other and PCRM, Gregor's or Barnard's site and McDougall's site. And there are so many sites where the science is laid out very clearly. And it's not hidden. It's not just someone's belief. Oh, can I tell you? You want to know about my breakfast for the 25 different plants? Okay. I've gone over this a few times, but I'm going to try to do it as quickly as I can. So, I bring out a bowl and I start with a couple cherry tomatoes I put in the bowl. And then I go to the refrigerator and I grab just about a quarter of a cup of mung beans, which I grow by myself. And then on the mung beans, I take a jalapeno pepper and I chop it up and throw it on the mung beans. And I also take a clove of garlic. I don't know, are you counting? You got to keep track. That's about 4. The clove of garlic, which is fresh, and I chop it up and throw it on that. And okay, so now I've got to there. Now I go to the next bin, and the next bin it has the broccoli in it. So I slice off about a 3/4 cup to a cup of broccoli. And then for my wife, she likes it steamed, so it goes on the counter somewhere else. And then we pull a radicchio leaf and cut it in half, and that acts as a bed for about a half a handful of spinach and a half a handful of arugula. And along with that, we have a little slice of purple cabbage and then jicama. We take a little slice of jicama and put that, and there's a Brazil nut occasionally that we put in there to add to this whole thing. So that is the first. Then there's a little fruit. So I get about 8 grapes, 4 go to my wife, 4 go to me, and then a strawberry or 2 for each of us. And then there's an orange, which we split in half. And then there is a couple, the cuties. So she gets 1 and I get 1. And then, let's see, before this, we've had a banana a piece and about 4 prunes. And I have a couple nuts. She likes them on her cereal. Okay, so that's one part. Then we go over to the steamed greens. And so we have 2 leaves of kale and 2 leaves of collard greens and 1 leaf of Swiss chard. And we chop that up and throw it in the steamer basket. And then we grab the broccoli, her broccoli's in there, and then a little dulse. We chop up a little dulse and throw it in there. And then we throw in a mushroom. And then we chop up a carrot, just not a whole carrot, like maybe a third of a long carrot for a little taste. That all gets steamed now over 1 minute, or pressure cooked actually, in the pressure cooker. Okay, so while that's doing its thing, we take out a half a cup apiece of beans that we've prepared. So we're getting legumes. And then we also, we have this morning I did just a very tiny amount of, what are those seeds that are purple, that are little tiny things? Pomegranates. So a little pomegranate that we have frozen, and then there is half a cup of blueberries for each of us. So those are frozen, and we thaw them out. And then, okay, so now we have our fruit, we have our greens, we split that up half and half out of the steamer when it gets done, put the beans on top of the greens, add a little mustard powder to each of our dishes because of the steamed greens that we have for the enzyme. And then a little balsamic vinegar. We add on top of that a tablespoon or 2 of balsamic vinegar. That's half of our breakfast. Now we're going to get to the groats. We do about 3/4 of a cup of groats a piece. And then on top of the groats, we have a tablespoon of flaxseed ground up for each of us. We have a tablespoon of hemp hearts, a tablespoon of what is that? Chia seeds, and a half a tablespoon of wheat germ because of the spermidine that Greger has talked about in his longevity book. We just added that. We add a few raisins in on top of that, and some plant-based milk, either soy or whatever. I can't think of it right now.
Oat milk.
What is it? Oat. Yeah, oat milk, soy or oat. And then we add, some of those orange kind of berries. They are, I can't think of the name right now, but it's one of those super
Like
berries.
goji berries.
Yeah, that's it. Goji berry. Thank you. Just a few goji berries on top, and the walnuts. We have like a quarter of a cup of walnuts apiece. How much is that? How many items? I have
That
no.
is 37.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whoa. I knew it was between 30 and 40. And I mean, it took me a half hour today to prepare that, but it was kind of fun. And you don't have to eat like that. I do it just kind of as a game right now and as a challenge. If we forget something or, we're in a hurry, we may not, we may forget something or the other or whatever, but we try to have it available and we usually do it together. So it takes about 20 minutes to get all that together. So there you have it. How
Do
did we
you
start this all? We started with oatmeal
do
13
you
years
cook
ago.
your groats in the Instapot?
Yeah, we do the groats in the Instapot, and we do them. Um, we started at 18 minutes, then we heard 40 minutes, then we went to 30 minutes. We've kind of settled at about 22 minutes, I think, of the groats. You can cook them for a lot longer if you want, however long you cook them, and they're they're really good. And adding those extra little things like we just started doing the hemp hearts and the chia seeds over the last couple months. Okay, some days my wife says, "Oh, this is too much food," and sometimes I think, "Oh, this I'm so full," and so I may cut back the next day, and instead of uh, 6 leaves of dark green leafies, cut it back to 4. That's what I'll do. But my wife never seems to. She does the 6 all the time. And we just suck it up and eat it. And we're pretty stuffed until about dinner time with that. And dinner, what? Baked potato, some hummus, some salsa, so a couple handfuls of greens, and for dessert, fruit. Very easy, no muss, no fuss. Tonight, I made dinner, baked potato, just what I told you, some lemon something hummus, lemon herb hummus with salsa, salad. Oh, I forgot to tell you, my wife sometimes will add some pumpkin seeds as an additional little treat in the morning to say, hey, I got something new for you here. That's 38. But we don't do it all the time. All right, I don't mean to scare anybody off by what we're eating. No one has to eat that much. It's just purely, it's sort of like some people are obsessive compulsive about this thing. And I don't know, right now I just do it as a challenge and it's fun to tell people how many different foods we can eat in a day. Just like doing a plank. Like who cares if you do a plank for over 3 minutes? Because if you can do a 3-minute plank, you're pretty healthy actually. So if you do it 5 minutes, that's great. Do it 11 minutes. Who cares really? You're healthy. And it's the same way with this. If you're eating just plants, you don't have to eat 37 in your one meal. You could eat 5 plants and be healthy doing that. Just do 5 additional plants somewhere the rest of the day, and then tomorrow do 5 different. But some people like to eat the same foods every day, they tell me. And so the more variety, the more diverse your microbiome. I've talked way too much. Any questions from anybody else?
Well, it sounds to me like you make a game out of it.
Yeah, I make it fun.
And it's kind of a challenge. You
I-
kind of see, it's your way of enjoying your food preparation.
It is. And I think about what Scott says. And it took me a while to come around to this because I'm like, hey, you need to do this for your health. You're not going to control your diabetes unless you do it. And he keeps harping on if this is not fun, it's not going to last very long. So I want to make sure you're all listening to that message. You want to make this a fun thing. You want to incorporate foods that you like. There was one food I hated, I never wanted to eat because I must have been exposed to those canned mushrooms that are mushy when I was a kid. I never ate a mushroom until I became totally whole food plant-based. And it took me about maybe 6 or 8 years listening to Gregor and his videos. And he kept harping on me about how mushrooms are the only plant that has, I don't know, what is it, aromatase or some
Aromatase.
kind of, huh?
Yeah, aromatase inhibitors, yeah.
An anti-cancer kind of compound in it. And so I kind of told myself, why aren't you eating this? Don't cook it so much. Eat it a little more raw or whatever it is. So you don't have to eat it completely raw. Just steam it very lightly. And I've learned to like it. And now I miss it if I don't eat one button mushroom every single day. But I've
I
learned
have
to
a
have fun with it.
well, I have an for me easy way to cook my grains and my beans. I have my Instant Pot, and I put them in, and I put them in for about 7 minutes, and then I can go out and I can work in my garden. I can go to the store. I can do basically anything, and then when I come back, they're cooked.
Yeah.
So it makes it a whole lot easier than waiting the 20 minutes or whatever it is. And you know, I have to be a little careful because sometimes they get a little mushy, but I still eat them.
Yeah.
So anyway, somebody wants an easy, something they don't have to watch all the time. That's my method.
Well, we've managed to make it another hour and a half with Big Mouth here, continuing on. But I sure had fun, and I hope you had a little fun listening to some of this. And next week, Scott, we're going on
It's
to.
yeah, it's avoiding risky substances and food addiction with Elizabeth Maxwell. And there will be no class at the Grange on Friday because the Grange is occupied for the Scottish festival. So it'll just be online only a week from tonight.
So for Elizabeth, I've listened to her, and the time I heard her, it was very interesting and fascinating, and I encourage you to log on again next week. She's worth spending some time with. And I'm going to be off to my granddaughter's graduation, the one who got accepted to about 5 different colleges and decided on Stanford. She's
Oh,
she hasn't quite yet beat me in a chess, and I'm going to challenge her someday. But since she's going to Stanford, she probably will be able to wipe me out one of these days. I don't know. I'll joke with her a little bit about that. See what her response is. Anyway, everybody, it's been fun. See you in a couple weeks. And Scott, I'll see you soon.
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Okay, have a good night.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Tamara, thank you for doing the
Yeah, thanks.
classes.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you, guys. You too.